Hi everyone, thanks for joining this session. Today we're going to talk about anatomy of a design case study. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, yeah, so we're going to talk about anatomy of a design case study, a very uh, important artifact when it comes to your portfolio, how you share your design, how do you communicate your design to higher up stakeholders, to other people who are not familiar with your process. Uh, so before we get started on that part, a little bit about me. It's always uncomfortable to talk about yourself as a designer. We're not used to it, but I'm doing better than I used to like a few years ago. So I'm Pushkar, as they talked about. I'm a UX UI lead at Archaea. It's a game studio. We work on VR, AR products, games, and solutions. So recently, I worked on Doom 3 for PSVR, and I'm currently working on Foundation VR, which is based on Isaac Asimov's a great epic sci-fi story. So I worked in advertising, games, and I also teach at VFS VR area. I teach two design courses here over there. I have about 23 years of design experience across three continents. So I worked in Vancouver, I worked in Dubai, I worked in Mumbai, and yeah, and that's that's pretty much it. Like there's not much there. Uh, but here, before I get started, uh, I want to talk about a little bit about, do you need a case study or why do you need a case study? So if you could just send any responses in chat, we can go over those. And it's always good to hear from people. Like, does everybody feel like they need a case study, or it's like one of those things that only few people need? So not too many responses, but I feel like we as designers, when we work on complex project, we are always uh, solving problems as a designer. And a case study is a very quick and a succinct way to share that process, that idea, how you came up with it, what kind of process did you use. All these things are very easy for us to package in a case study. And Shilpa is talking about like some potential employers also need to see your work and how you're going to share. It's not enough just to share three screenshots or a few mobile, beautiful looking comms. It's not enough because we deal with not only ideas, we solve problems using design. So case study is a very good way to demonstrate that experience. Uh, the second part that I want to talk about is like, this is the whole talk is all about, right? Like, how do you create a case study? So have any people in the audience, like, have you all done case studies or working towards one, or that's why you're here to learn about how to make one? So any responses there?
Yes. So people were saying like case study is a must. It shows a process and it helps to summarize and present
Mhm.
during the design process. And yeah, people say this
Yeah,
is
and
their first time, and so
some people are doing their first one. That's
yes.
interesting. So yeah, you're in the right place. I feel like this is my point of view of how to do a case study. But I have been doing case studies for many years across different industries. Right, in advertising, it has a different purpose. You usually send it to clients to get more work, or you send it for awards. You kind of encapsulate everything in a minute and a half. Uh, in design, you share it as a process to get another job or to pitch for another client. Uh, so different purposes, and as UX designer, we have to identify our audience and the purpose, right? What this is for. So that's what we are going to look at today. So this today, the thing that I'm talking about is a case study that is focused only as a UX or a product designer. This does not necessarily apply to all different types of design, like graphic design or service design or many different type of design, but it usually applies to design where you're solving a problem. You're starting with something that you're trying to solve or make modification, iterate on something. Uh, so this is the part where I usually use this format, and it's known as the star format of storytelling. Because in a case study, we're sharing a story of our product, how we came about it, how did we find the problem, was this the right problem? Uh, that's where it kind of all boils down to. So I hope other people have heard about this star format. It's a very kind of essential format in storytelling, and it works when you're telling a story about yourself. So imagine you're traveling in an elevator and you meet, I don't know, some of the design gods, and they're like, "Hey, what do you do?" You could use this format to tell a story about this. This is me. This is what I do. This is what I'm working on. So just like how you introduce yourself, you can use this star format. So star format is basically an acronym for SEAR. So S stands for situation. Like how did you come across this situation? Like what was the problem? Like it could be it was the COVID times, or it was the Great Depression, or it was uh, the boom years, whatever it might be, right? Like it's the situation. Like what gave rise to this problem. Second is the task to be done. Like, what did you do? What exactly you were expected to do? What is the problem you're trying to solve here? And the third part is usually the solution that you took, the action that you took. So this is basically looking at the analysis and the solutions that you implemented. Uh, and the last part is a key part, which is result. Because if they were not good results or bad, this whole thing is futile. Now, I understand that some of your students, this might be your first case study, you might not have the results, but try to find something, right? Like it always helps to have a number there. Like we shared this case study with 20 people, and 8 of them liked it, 3 of them were okay, and 4 of them didn't like it. And we learned this. So it can also be that. It doesn't always have to be this app was downloaded 50 million times and we made, I don't know, $1 million of money. It doesn't have to be that. You can find results from pretty much everything. So keep an open mind towards that. Uh, I hope everyone's clear about this STAR or the star format uh, through this slide, because that's what I will be referring to throughout this talk. Uh, so if you want, take a screenshot, keep something, Google it, but you'll find plenty of stuff on it. So this is the format that comes from storytelling, as I mentioned, but I have appropriated it to design, right? And I feel like it works pretty well. Uh, a lot of times I have been using this format. So again, star format. So I'm just gonna go into a typical template of a case study that you would share. And don't worry, don't have to take screenshot. At the end of the project, CJ, me, and Iterate UX is going to share the link with you all. So you can just download the case study format and just take it over, make it your own, right? Uh, don't have to stick to everything in there, and I'll point out to the parts that are optional. But it's overall a pretty good guideline, I must say. You don't have to do everything in there, but it's a good start, I would say, right? Like as design, every problem is different. That's why every solution is different, and that's exactly the reason why every case study is different. I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
So this is the first slide. This is about your project name, and hopefully, if you have a team name or a company name, just make it nice, make it inviting. Like put like a nice image, maybe some GIF animation. As you can see, I'm obsessed with GIFs. I keep throwing GIFs everywhere I can. Keep it subtle. Don't make it cat GIFs or rainbow GIFs. Nothing wrong with that. It just might be a bit distracting. Uh, so first thing, project name, team name. Keep it simple. And moving to the second part. Here we're going to talk about the actual situation that happened. And I put notes over there, so you will be able to take a look at the note. So here in the situation part, this is part one, the key part, right? And I've kind of color coded these things. So whatever you see in pink is very, very important. Whatever you see in blue is not as important, equally important, but I would say equally, just a little less important. So when it comes to situation, describe the situation that led you to this UX design project. Like, what did you do? Like I was talking about before, it was the COVID times, it was the depression time, it was the boom time. Whatever gave rise to this problem, like a little bit of context, little bit of a setup, right? So Just like how you think about when movies start, they immediately don't start with the climax. There's a build up, right? There's already a little bit of a start to get there. So this is what we're doing here with the project name, the situation. We're building it up towards that. Like this is what was happening. This is why we did it. Right? Uh, After the situation, we get into the actual task. Like describe the task that was assigned, including the goals and objective that were set. And many times, these goals, or at least the start of these goals, will come from a client, right? That client you're working with. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, make me a website, or build me an app, or can we look at this iPad screen?" Right? So whatever that might be, sometimes these tasks will come from client. Sometimes you make up your own. So if you're really lucky, a client will give you an open brief and say, "This is my problem, and give me a solution, whatever medium it might be." Many times we, as UX designers, are not that lucky. Sometimes we're told, like, "Make me a VR game, make me an AR game, make me an app, make me a TV commercial," whatever that solution might be, right? Make me a Apple Watch app, whatever that might be. Sometimes it's given, sometimes it's not. And as I'm saying here, I won't read through all the side, but explain what was expected. After this, the part three, that is one of the most important parts, is the action. This is the meat of the case study. This is, sorry for all those non-vegetarians, but this is the chunk, the key part of the case study, right? So here we talk about what was the action that you took. And this starts from, we started doing some research, we started talking to people, we did diary studies, we did interview, we just met a bunch of people. Whatever that thing is you did, talk about that. And more detail you have about your experience, it'll help. You just don't necessarily have to put it everything in the case study. But as you become a more and more experienced UX designer, you'll start making those assumptions, or start getting better at assuming which part to share and which part to leave out. Because you can always have the long version of it on your website, but a short version is something that you present. So always have two versions of your projects: the long version and the quick version, or the elevator pitch, as we like to call it. Like this is a case study about 20-25 slides is good. Anything more than that, I feel like just takes too long and people lose interest. So the action again. So use specific examples to illustrate how you and the design team approach the project. So action is the third part. Now here I'm starting to talk about details in the action bit, right? So this is, I said that the blue part is not as essential part. It's kind of interchangeable, but sometimes it's what you're doing. If you're a UX researcher, this will become the major part of your case study. So in the research part, describe the research method. Like, did you do qualitative? Did you do quantitative? Did you do diary study? Did you do interview? Whatever that thing is you did, talk about that. List that out. Maybe with some nice pictures. That always helps, right? It gives some visual element. So describe the research method used to gain insight into the user needs and behavior. This is very important because we are user experience designer, right? So user is a very essential part of it. In the human-centered design, these are the humans we need to know about. So this is what we talk about. So explain how the research informed your design decision. So there's a direct correlation between your research and your design, right? So it should be clear. It should be like you research something, the finding was something different, and you went ahead and did something completely different that looks great on Dribble, but doesn't solve the problem, right? So I hope everyone's clear about that so far. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. CJ and I, we're looking at that chat. I might not be able to look at it directly at every time, but I will reply. And if I'm talking really fast, let me know. Sometimes I get excited and start talking really fast.
Yes.
So another part of the your action bit is the personas, and I hope everybody is familiar with personas and archetypes. This is where we introduce the user personas that were developed based on your research. So what kind of audience you're looking for, what kind of demographic, where do they live, what is their purchasing power, what medium they consume, where are your touch points. These kind of things need to be covered in a persona. I'm not going to get into too much detail into persona because I'm assuming this is being covered before. I hope you're already familiar with that. But you have to highlight the key characteristics and needs of each persona, because your needs and aspiration lead to what you're building over. Uh, just after the personas, now that you know who your audience is, this week start talking about how do they go about their day, like a day in life of a user, or how does the user get to your product, how do they consume it. And it doesn't just stop like where they stop, how they got there, how do they use it, what do they interact, how do they interact with it. So there are two parts of the user flow. There's a how the user got to your product and how the user is using your product. So these points need to be identified and reflected. So you want to look at pain points, problems, and the opportunities they give rise to. There are different formats. Some are better than the others. Some are appropriate for a particular thing that you're doing. But they're all equally good. As long as you have it, it, it helps. It helps a lot. Right? Uh, Next bit we're going to cover after the user flow is a design iteration. And I know this is a contest that you're doing. It's a quick like a crash course into UX design. So you might be going through it very quickly. You might not have a lot of iterations here. So in a real design project, you will have iteration. You will have a pivot. You'll go back. You'll come back. You'll go spin around. Do all kinds of Scrum weird things and iterations, and you'll come back to that solution. Sometimes the first solution is what you come to. Sometimes it's is the fourth one or it's the 29th one. It does not matter. Represent that and show how many iterations you went through. What did you learn out of each one of those iterations? So show your design iteration that created based on the user research feedback and the personas that you built. Explain how the user journey, sorry, what am I reading? Uh, so explain how each iteration was tested and refined based on the user feedback. Uh, this part is very, very important. This part is what shows you or a potential client or a potential hiring manager that you didn't just find the first solution and ran with it. Because it's never that simple. As in design, we always go through a couple of iterations at least. So in graphic design, we always show the final shiny thing, right? But in UX, it's very important to show your flow, to show your process, how many times or what all you did to come to this solution. Okay? So make sure you show at least a few iterations, and some of them can be big, some of them can be small. But as long as you're covering that, it's very, very important. As a hiring manager, I hire quite a few UX designers, and different projects that I worked on. I always look at how much they're iterating and how much they're developing through every iteration. That becomes very, very important. So key aspect, it is optional to show many iterations, but at least show a few. Uh, this third, like I have lost count how many paths we are on, but one more thing that has become very, very important in the last few years, I must say, it's always been important, but it's in the limelight for the last few years. That is accessibility. And accessibility, if you have covered it, kudos to you, because you're accommodating for your design to be carried forward, not just for everybody who's able-bodied and can use their thumbs with ultimate dexterity. You're also accommodating for people who have a learning disability, some people who are older generation, or some people who can't use the phone really well, or they can't use the internet really well. If you're accommodating for these solutions, it shows your maturity as a designer. So discuss the accessibility consideration that were taken into account during your design process. This becomes very, very important. throughout the process. It's that one more tick in your tool chest, right? Like one more ability that you have. So if you are a designer who's thinking about accessibility, I would say all the time, you are one of the top few designers who's working in the field. You become a very coveted, uh, you become a very valuable commodity in the design industry. So highlight any accessibility features that were implemented. Make sure you do that if you consider that. Like if you have a version of a black background versus white background, that is accommodating accessibility. If you implemented a version where you can have a slightly bigger size text or a high, medium, uh, low kind of a text setting, high contrast setting, if you did that, make sure you show that, make sure you talk about it, because it's a very important thing. And I feel as a design community, it's our responsibility to be for our design to be accessible across different audiences. Uh, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the prototype. And prototype is a lot more important in immersive media, the medium where I come from, uh, because um, it's all about showing how the product, how the design works. So if you did a prototype for a game, or if you did a prototype in Figma for a mobile app, or if you did a website, show that, because it'll really help people get a very good idea about what your design actually looks like. It's not just about doing paper design, which is really nice to look at. It makes great screenshots on Dribble, but it doesn't work really well. So when you have prototype, you can also show, I implemented these micro animation. This is how my flow was. This is how uh, uh, my happy user path is, but this is where the error path is. Like if they hit any errors, this is what I show. And you can show that all that kind of stuff really, really well through a prototype. So demonstrate the interactive prototype that was developed to test your design. And make sure you use this prototype to test it with few people. Like show it around, show it to people. Do they navigate it exactly the way you thought? Like something like a card sorting, that kind of exercise you can do to understand that is everybody going through the objective you wanted them to? Like can they, if you doing a shopping app, can they select a piece of clothing? Can they wish list this? Can they put it in the cart? Can they make a purchase? Can they return it? That kind of flow you can only test through prototype. You cannot test it through a flat design. Uh, so prototype becomes very, very important. Explain the user testing methods used and the feedback received. This part, it works really well when you have a prototype, a user journey, and user testing combined. Because just think about it, you probably heard this a lot. User experience design without research, it's just one designer's opinion. Uh, so I don't know who quoted it. It's probably one of the gods of design, like Steve Jobs, or I don't know who. But that's something that is always at the back of my mind, that the design needs to be tested. Otherwise, it's just my opinion. And that's mostly wrong, because I make a lot of assumptions when we design. We all do, right? So whole point of doing user research is to validate or invalidate those assumptions. The next part that we're going to talk about after the prototype is the result. Now, uh, this is the conclusion. This is what you're working towards. So when we did this, this happened. When we did this was successful. When we made the app, it was unsuccessful, and we know why. We did research into why. So results are what clients are looking for. Results are what hiring managers are looking for. Was this successful? Did it do well? Did it do badly? What did you learn? These are the things they're looking at. And many times, bigger the corporation, better the metrics they will have to test these results. But if you can throw in some numbers over there, like we tested this with 200 people, and this many people liked it, this many people got through, this many people failed, those numbers are always good. As many key figures you can get into that is always good. So present the results of the user testing conducted after the implementation. This has to be after a phase. So it could be after the alpha phase in your records. Okay. I was like, who's this AI voice? So yeah, so when you're talking about results, explain how the results were used uh, to further improve the design, because this is very important. This is where sometimes companies pivot. They'll be like, oh, we were trying to get this thing and trying to reach this audience, but it did not work really well. That's why we had to pivot. So pivot in a design or pivot into a product strategy is always resulting from one of these results. And you need to explain why that happened. Uh, Now, the next slides that I'm talking about are part about these results as a key umbrella term. Uh, but the next thing that is inside, if you want, like another part of the result is key metrics. Now, this is optional. You might not have this at a junior level, or you might not have it as a student project. But always try to figure out what kind of metrics are we using. Are we using metrics as how many people are using the app? Are we using at how much user engagement is there? How many click throughs went through? How many people were able to make that purchase? If we are talking about that uh, same clothes purchasing or fashion app, what are our conversion rates? What is the user satisfaction? Always think about these metrics, because this is what is important as a UX designer, because we're data driven, right? We will not make decisions based on just me as a designer. I feel this shouldn't be doing happening this way. That's not my decision. The data will drive the decision. The user research findings will drive the decision. So this is where the key metrics come into play, and you can explain how uh, the metrics were tracked and how they were improved over time. So there needs to be a progression, how you use the metric and how they got better, or they were changed because you're not getting the data you want. So key metrics, again, another important part of uh, of the case study process. Uh, I'm on my last few slides. So here we're talking about learnings, and the learnings is another important part, especially important if you're a student, because the first project you do is not going to be successful. It is going to fail. Many of your projects are going to fail, and we learn through failure. I'm still learning. I've been working for 20, 23 years, still learning through failure, and that's the only way we learn, right? So reflect on the design process uh, and lessons learned that highlight successes, challenges faced, and how they could be addressed in future projects. So this is how we did this project. This is why it worked, or this is how it failed, or this is what I would choose change in the next project. How would I do this? Right? Uh, Again, if I had to do the same project all over again, what would I change? Uh, it needs to be very well thought of, and learning sometimes even before I've seen the project, I scroll down to a student's learnings, because I'm curious, like, what did you learn out of this? If you haven't learned through your successes or failures, how will you improve? So learning is very, very important as a section. uh, that's why you will see that this is not optional. This is a very, very important slide. This is the very important section of your portfolio. uh, I'm getting some questions on the chat. I'll take them after maybe three
Yeah.
slides, because that's when we take a break. uh, but after learnings, we have the next bit is the impact. And this is also key metrics. This is also shows that what kind of impact did it have on users and the business. Did it make the business better, or did you lose customers? uh, and why you lost customers? Why are you getting more customers? What exactly is the thing that is working? It's not just enough to have a successful design. It's very important to analyze that success or failure of these things. uh, the next part, next section in the impact is use specific examples and data to show positive outcomes on the project. It's always important to show positive outcomes, because there's always something. But if you have, like, if the project completely failed, I feel like there's quite a bit to learn from there, because you know exactly what not to do, right? So don't be shy, or don't be afraid that this project completely failed. You can still learn out of that. And I'm on my last two slides where I'm talking about a summary. This is what we call in like a conclusion, or it's TLDR, too long didn't read that section. So summarize key points and takeaways from the UX case study using the STAR method that we did. Uh, Encourage the that you want to encourage people. Sorry, there's a typo there. Encourage the audience to. This is a message for you all. I had to put by mistake. I put in there. But you want to think critically about the UX design process and ask any questions. Right, like ask a question. Like always leave that section there to talk about. If you have any questions about my case study, this is where you can ask me, or this is keep the dialogue going. Uh, and the last section that you want to use, even after the summary, is who worked on this team, who all were doing, what was the role that you exactly did. I'm assuming this is in your portfolio, but if you're presenting this as a group, you want to talk about who are the team members and what exactly each one of the person did, who did what, how long it took, what are the tools you use. Did you use Photoshop? Did you use Figma? Did you use Unity? Use Unreal? Use Quest? You use AR, VR, whatever that thing you use, technology, third party plugins, what all did you use? You want to talk about that. So this is kind of the summary slide and the team slide kind of go together.
Hey everyone, on behalf of Iterate UX, we would like to thank you so much for watching this week's event. If you like the content, please leave a like and subscribe. We'll have events every Thursday at 5:30 Pacific Time. Join our Discord in the description to find out more.